hey guys, tonight we're headed deep into the candlelit corridors of the Tang Dynasty, past silk robes, ink-stained desks, and way too many official seals, where you, a mid-level government clerk, are frantically trying not to drown in a sea of paperwork. Your eyes sting, not from emotion, but from the endless scrolls you've been reviewing for the past 7 hours. The room smells like dried ink, boiled bamboo paper, and that one incense stick you lit 2 hours ago that now just smells like scorched regret. Outside, cicadas scream into the darkness, but inside, it's all the scratch of brushes and the slow, terrifying realization that you might not finish this on time. Tomorrow, a high-ranking minister is coming for a surprise inspection. You know this because a very sweaty courier burst into your office earlier, wheezing something about urgency before collapsing into a bucket of fish brine outside. You didn't ask why the fish brine was there. You're past asking questions. So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, drop your city and local time in the comments. It's always fun to see who else can't sleep. Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. You are Deputy Records Overseer of the Southern Rice District. Population, too many. It's not glamorous, it's not prestigious, but it pays well enough to keep your robe unpatched and your tea bowl full, usually. Lately, however, tea has been replaced with something stronger. Survival mode panic and fermented plum juice stolen from the commissary. Your desk is a mess. Scrolls upon scrolls. Trade records, tax receipts, grain tallies from provinces you're pretty sure don't exist. You'd ask the assistant to check, but he ran off around sunset after declaring his lifelong dream to live as a goose. You hope he finds happiness. Midnight approaches. The lamp sputters. You haven't slept properly in days, and your handwriting is beginning to look like a drunk spider's calligraphy. Every time you close your eyes, you dream of ink blots chasing you through the imperial court, chanting missing seals, missing seals. One document in particular stares at you like it knows your secrets. A land requisition form filed by a noble named Shun, who, if memory serves, was executed 3 weeks ago. Which raises the question, why is he requesting irrigation funds posthumously? You jot a note in the margin. Check Shun's status, preferably not undead. Historically, Tang Dynasty bureaucracy was among the most sophisticated in the world's civil service exams, department divisions, and a class of officials trained in Confucian classics. Impressive, unless you're the one managing grain taxes during a locust season. You tug your robe tighter and stretch your aching shoulders. The paper pile hasn't shrunk. In fact, you're pretty sure it's grown taller. Is it breathing? Nope, that's just the draft coming through the cracked window. You sealed it earlier with paste made from rice and despair. You hear a distant gong echo through the city. Probably third watch somewhere around 1A. The inspection is in less than 5 hours. You're not ready. You're so not ready. Your audit logs are incomplete. The clerical rolls are missing 3 names, and the most recent barley shipment was misrecorded as 20 sacks of moderately aggressive frogs. Again, the frogs were your fault. You were multitasking. Never again. A strange historical tidbit. Some Tang officials actually hired professional scribes to handle their writing. You tried that once, but your scribe kept composing haikus in the margins, and one got published in the local gazette. Now everyone thinks you're the one who wrote "Tax Me Not, for my heart withers like plum blossom." You're still getting weird fan mail. 6 ounces of ink. That's how much you've used tonight, twice the usual dose and about 1 sneeze away from total chaos. And then, of course, it happens. You reach across your desk to grab another dispatch from the northern rice granaries and knock over your inkstone. The heavy, carved slab flips like a villain in an opera, and a thick stream of black ink splashes across the pristine scroll beneath it. Perfect line. Right through a month's worth of barley quotas. You freeze. There's that half second when time seems to pause. The crickets outside go quiet. Even the candle's flame holds still, as if the entire universe is waiting to see how badly you're about to lose it. And then, full meltdown. You snatch up cloths. Too late. The ink's already seeped deep into the paper fibers, turning official numbers into abstract art. You now possess the Tang Dynasty's first modern painting, titled Oops. You mutter something that would be profanity if it weren't phrased as a Buddhist mantra. It sounds peaceful. It isn't. Buried beneath the scroll is the one thing you cannot afford to lose. A small jade stamp with the prefect's personal seal. Without it, nothing you sign is official. You frantically lift parchment after parchment, panic sweating through your robe until finally, there it is, stuck to the bottom of a market ledger with what appears to be dried plum sauce. You'd cry, but you already used up your tears last week when you realized you'd been calculating wheat taxes using the T measurement unit. The resulting financial disaster is still referred to by your clerks as the Great Cha Grain Fiasco. A soft knock at the side door. You flinch. Who visits this late? You slide the panel open and squint out into the moonlight. It's Bao, the junior clerk who looks perpetually worried and wears a headband that reads "Resist Chaos" in embroidered thread. He's clutching a bamboo basket and what might be a letter. "Sir," he whispers, "urgent message from the Eastern District. Unless it involves floods or insurrection," you murmur. "It can wait until dawn." "It's about ducks," he says, eyes wide. "Of course it is." You take the scroll, already exhausted. Inside is a beautifully penned letter from the duck tax coordinator. Yes, that's a real title, outlining discrepancies in poultry counts and something about a missing ledger from last season. You vaguely remember loaning that ledger to a visiting scholar in exchange for sesame candies. Regret floods your soul. Historically, the Tang Dynasty's record-keeping was so meticulous that entire villages were sometimes reorganized just to fit new census categories. Efficiency, they called it. You call it your personal nightmare. You lean back, hands sticky with dried ink, and realize something far worse. This error, the one you just made, means your barley figures won't match the shipment logs. And the auditor coming in the morning, he's famous for loving mismatches. He calls them career opportunities. You slump lower. This is how it ends. Not in glory, but under a pile of grain math and poultry drama. Suddenly, there's a rustle outside the window. You jerk upright, reaching for your abacus like it's a weapon. "It's just me," whispers a voice, and a lanky figure climbs through the window with the grace of a drunken crane. He's got no eyebrows. You stare. "Oh right," he grins, panting. "Leeches. Tried that mountain detox trend. Regret everything." It's Lou, the wandering calligrapher who occasionally shows up with gifts, gossip, and an uncanny talent for forgery you pretend not to notice. He gestures to the chaotic mess on your desk. "I brought ink and dumplings. Both are welcome, one slightly more than the other." He laughs and settles beside you, pulling out a brush with bristles like silk and a small inkwell shaped like a dragon's nose. "Heard about the inspection. Word travels, especially when someone accidentally mails a memo to the Poetry Bureau instead of the military office." You go cold. "That was you." Lou pats your shoulder. "Relax. They thought it was a satire. Even nominated it for an award." "Of course they did." He glances at the ink-streaked barley scroll. "I can fix that." You squint. "Without making it worse?" "I'm insulted," he says, then pauses. "Also, yes, probably." You push the ruined document toward him and sink your face into your hands. From across the desk, Lou hums tunelessly as he works, occasionally muttering about brush strokes and divine proportions. "Did you hear," he says casually, "about the magistrate in Dong Zhou who stamped every report with a fish?" You raise an eyebrow. "Why?" "Claimed it was symbolically auspicious. Also, he lost the real stamp in a rice paddy." You sigh. "That actually makes sense. A lot more sense than what's happening here tonight." Historians still argue whether the Tang Dynasty's obsession with written records was a form of control or just intense cultural pride. You think maybe it's both. Pride in paper, power in ink. You wonder if anyone will ever read your work centuries from now, uncovering your exact grain miscalculations and concluding, "Ah yes, this poor soul was clearly sleep-deprived." Eventually, Lou finishes. You peek at the scroll. It's perfect, as if the ink spill never happened. You hate how good he is. "Thanks," you mutter. "You saved me." He winks. "You'll owe me a favor." That's never good. With the scroll salvaged and ink refilled, you feel a flicker of something dangerously close to optimism. Maybe, just maybe, you can make it through the inspection. You check the roster one last time and scribble a final note. "Buy Lou new eyebrows, possibly real ones." Then you light a fresh candle, brace yourself, and dive into the next scroll. Because this is only the beginning. It's just after 2 a. And you're calculating, for the second time tonight, how long it would take to fake your death and flee to the western mountains. You figure if you ride hard, avoid checkpoints, and wear a convincing beard, you might just make it. Then you remember, you don't know how to ride a horse. Also, you have flat feet. So instead, you keep scribbling. Diligently, desperately, delusionally. The candle is burning dangerously low, casting shaky shadows over your desk. Every scroll seems to mutter something mean in bureaucrat speak. You're trying to rebalance a rice shipment log that doesn't add up when Lou reappears beside you, noiseless as a cat with a guilty conscience. "I found another dumpling," he whispers, holding it like it's sacred. You stare. "Where was it?" "Inside my sleeve." No questions. You decide that's one mystery best left unsolved. Lou chews contentedly, leaning over to peer at your latest scroll. "This isn't going to work," he says through a mouthful of pork. "You're using the old ledger format." You squint. "How can you tell?" He smirks. "Because it still refers to Governor He of Five Noses. He retired 3 years ago. Well, was retired. Forcefully, right? That guy. Famous for sneezing on foreign ambassadors." You let out a groan and drag a hand over your face. "I can't keep up, Lou. Every time I fix one document, 2 more show up with errors. It's like the records are breeding." He pats your back. "You need help. Not just me and Bao. A real clerk. A lifer." And that's when he says it. "I know a guy." You look up. Of course you do. Lou smiles like a man about to offer you either salvation or a total disaster. "Name's Chow. Once wrote a prefect's entire tax audit by memory. Hasn't slept more than 3 hours a night since the Lushan rebellion. Completely unkillable." And he adds, he has no eyebrows. You pause. "Why does everyone in your circle lack eyebrows?" "Bureaucracy takes its toll," he says, completely serious. 20 minutes later, Chow arrives. He doesn't walk in. He glides in a tattered robe, carrying nothing but a brush roll and a chipped tea mug that says "World's Okayest Clerk." He nods once, takes one look at your disaster zone of a desk, and says, "You're 6 scrolls behind and 3 falsified documents deep." You blink. "Wait, which ones are?" He cuts you off. "I'm not here to judge. I'm here to alphabetize." And then he starts working. His hands are a blur. He hums softly, something that sounds like funeral music for a pigeon, and scrolls begin sorting themselves under his command. Ink flows. Paper flies. Lou watches, impressed. Bao reappears from somewhere, holding a tray of sesame cakes and confusion. You take a step back, utterly overwhelmed by the unfolding clerical miracle. Historically, the Tang bureaucracy relied heavily on such paper sorcerers. Not quite famous, but absolutely necessary. The people who kept the imperial machine humming while everyone else debated poetry and drank chrysanthemum wine. Chow pauses only once to ask, "Did you intentionally file 3 tax rebates under incidental goat?" You stare at him. Apparently, he nods, makes a note and mutters, "That's a bold move." You go back to your work, emboldened. Maybe you can survive the inspection. Maybe, with Lou's ink magic and Chow's ledger wizardry, you'll be the first clerk in district history to pass with minimal reprimands. That's when Bao speaks up. "Sir, we have a problem." You slowly turn. "Is it another duck thing?" He gulps. "No." Worse. He holds out a single, folded document. You recognize it instantly. The census addendum. The one for the northern mountain villages. The one you forgot to fill, the one that was due last month. Your stomach sinks. If the inspector finds out you're a full cycle late, you'll be reassigned to manure inspections. In the horse district. Again. The last month. Lou whistles low. "That's gonna be hard to explain." "Maybe," Chow says coolly, "we backdate it." You glance at him. "Is that legal?" Chow smiles a tired, haunted smile. "Nothing is legal. Everything is paperwork." You consider it. The scroll looks pristine. All it needs is the date seal from last month. A simple swap in the stamp drawer, Historians still argue whether the Tang system's reliance on seals promoted order or corruption. You think the answer depends on how close you are to losing your job. You make the call. You hand Xiao the old date seal. His hands don't even tremble as he presses the mark down with practiced ease. "There," he says, "just like it always was." Just then, a sharp knock at the outer door. You all freeze. Candlelight flickers. No one moves. The knock comes again, louder. Lu peeks out the window, then winces. "Oh." You step forward slowly. "What kind of oh are we talking?" He leans closer. "It's Lady One, from Records Oversight." You groan. She never shows up unless someone's getting fired, or promoted, but usually fired. You straighten your robe, wipe your ink-stained hands on your sash, and slide the door open. She's standing there, tall, composed, and wearing a robe so crisp it could cut a scroll in half. She surveys you with a stare that could freeze lava. "Clerk," she says, "we need to talk about your poultry numbers." Lady One steps into your study like it's enemy territory. She carries nothing but a lacquered folder and the unmistakable aura of someone who alphabetizes her dreams. You bow low, trying not to look like a man who just committed light bureaucratic fraud. She does not return the bow. Instead, she sweeps past you, eyes scanning the piles of scrolls and ink pots with the mild disgust of someone touring a goat pen disguised as an office. She stops at your desk, where Chow is still adjusting margins like he's tuning a zither. "You," she says. Chow looks up, startled. "Yes, you were reassigned to the Ministry of Silk 3 weeks ago." He blinks. "I declined." She narrows her eyes. "You can't decline." Chow shrugs. "I did anyway." Lu leans in and whispers. He's like that with death threats too. You suppress a groan as Lady One turns back to you. "Clerk, your poultry numbers." You gesture toward the offending scroll, neatly stacked near the inkstone. "All accurate, triple-checked. The duck discrepancies have been resolved." She lifts the scroll with 2 fingers, like it might bite her. As she reads, silence fills the room, thick and dangerous. You resist the urge to flee through the window. Eventually, she nods once, sharply. "This matches the central registry." You exhale like you've just avoided public beheading. But then she adds, "But your footnote dates are off." Your brain screams. Your mouth politely says, "I'll correct them." Lady One sits, uninvited. "Clerk," she says, folding her hands, "you're understaffed and behind. Yet your ledgers are somehow improving dramatically." You freeze. She taps the lacquered folder. "There's a line between initiative and impropriety. Don't cross it." Translation, she knows, or suspects. You nod carefully. "Understood." Then she stands just as abruptly. "Also, someone sent a tax report to the Ministry of Rights formatted as a poem." You shoot Lu a look. He grins. "Oddly moving," Lady One admits. But never again. Then, just like that, she leaves. No farewell, no smile. Just quiet footsteps fading into the corridor. You collapse onto the floor like a dropped dumpling. "That," Lu says, "could have gone worse." Chow holds up the scroll. "Your duck math actually was off. I fixed it mid-conversation." You stare at him. "You're terrifying." "Thank you." Outside, the night deepens. But inside, the candlelight feels less threatening now. You've survived Lady One. Barely. It's a win. You return to your desk, heart still racing, only to find a fresh stack of scrolls waiting. You consider crying. You consider throwing them out the window. Instead, you open the top one. It's the special goods report for the southern market towns, which means spices. You brace yourself. Historically, the Tang Empire was a thriving hub for trade, saffron from Persia, cinnamon from Ceylon, even dried seahorses from somewhere mysterious and uncomfortably humid. Every one of these luxury goods needed documentation, taxation, and in your case, endless reports. You skim the scroll and immediately spot a red flag. Literally, there's a small red symbol in the corner, one you haven't seen before, a stylized fox. No explanation, no header. You show it to Chow. He frowns. Contraband mark, or a joke. Depends who sent it. Where did this come from? Bao shuffles forward. Courier left it. Didn't speak. Just bowed and vanished. Lu raises a brow. A scroll courier who doesn't talk? Sounds like something out of a ghost opera. You crack the seal and read deeper. The scroll lists ambergris, rhino horn, and something called moon spice, which, as far as you know, does not legally exist. It's written in perfect bureaucratic script. But the numbers are wrong. And familiar, because they're yours. Someone's copied your ledger style. Someone is faking reports notes and signing them as you. Now you're fully awake. Your name, your department, your numbers, forged and repurposed. The implications roll over you like a landslide of paper cuts. Lu whistles softly. Looks like you have a fan. Or a rival, Xiao mutters. Historians still argue whether Tang officials routinely falsified reports to meet quotas, or if the few that were caught became scapegoats for a much larger web. All you know is that if this forgery spreads, you take the fall. You pace, trying to think. Someone must have had access to your records, your drafts, your format. You whirl on bow. Did anyone else touch the spice reports last week? He nods slowly. A traveling registrar. Said he was from Luoyang. Tall, very polite. Wore gloves. You blink. Why gloves? Kept saying he didn't want to taint the ink. Lu snorts. That's either poetic or deeply shady. You feel it now, a prickling sensation behind your ears. You've stumbled into something bigger than poultry math and grain spillages. Someone's running a shadow ledger, using your credibility as cover. You sit, overwhelmed, then reach for your brush. Xiao, you say, how fast can you help me track false entries? He cracks his knuckles. Fast enough. The night shifts around you, quieter now, focused. You're not just cleaning up paperwork anymore. You're chasing ghosts through ink trails. You've gone from clerk to investigator, and if you're being impersonated, you'll find out who's behind it. Eventually, right after you fix the spice quotas, and finish the barley summary, and recheck the poultry math again, because even mysterious shadow forgers can't stop the Tang Dynasty's real enemy, paperwork. You sit in silence for a long minute, staring at the inky sprawl of the forged spice report. Outside, the crickets are chirping in perfect rhythm, mocking you, because even the bugs have a better filing system than your district right now. You push back from your desk and sigh. We need to trace the fake numbers, line by line. Xiao's already 10 steps ahead, flipping open a scroll and muttering dates under his breath. The weights on this batch of ambergris are off by exactly 10 dough. That's either a coincidence or a signature. Lu grins. Ah, a lazy forger's tell, like a pickpocket who always hums while stealing. You glance at him. Are you familiar with pickpockets? He shrugs. Only academically. Bao pipes up from the corner, arms full of even more scrolls. I found this one in the miscellaneous taxation pile. Same weird red fox mark. You take it. Another fake. This one's dated 2 months earlier. The forgery goes back further than you thought. Lu scans it and snorts. Look at this. They taxed cinnamon twice, then refunded themselves. Bold. You're not just being impersonated. Someone's actively embezzling under your name, using your tidy paper trail to hide a very messy crime. Xiao points to the corner. All the red fox scrolls use a slightly different ink. It's darker, slightly oily. You dip a brush into it. It smells faintly of camphor, not something you use. You scribble a test character. The stroke glides too smoothly. Imported ink, Xiao confirms, usually used by elite scribes or very rich criminals. You take a slow breath. So, either someone from Central is behind this, or someone who wants us to think that. Historians still argue, Lu adds, whether high-level corruption was rare or just rarely documented. You lean back. The pieces don't fit yet, but the red fox mark, the forged spice entries, the camphor ink, they all point to someone organized, someone with access, and someone very confident you're too busy drowning in duck math to notice. Time for a counterattack. You gather your materials and begin drafting a fake internal audit memo. In your own handwriting, of course. You date it for next week, label it preliminary, and casually reference a surprise in-person investigation of trade route irregularities. You drop in phrases like monetary clawback and recommended expulsion. You sign it with the name of a real auditor, Assistant Inspector Fei, currently vacationing in Hangzhou and blissfully unaware he's now bait. Lu raises a brow. We're baiting a forger using fake paperwork? Only way to catch a bureaucrat, you mutter, is with even better bureaucracy. You'll stash the memo in the leakable file cabinet, the one everyone knows is occasionally accidentally left unlocked. If the forger has an informant inside the office, they'll see it. And if they react, you'll know you've got a live fish on the line. The plan feels good. Dangerous, but smart. Xiao approves. Calculated risk. Very Tang of you. You seal the memo and place it in the cabinet with theatrical nonchalance. Then you turn to Lu. We need eyes. Quiet ones. Who won't talk. He grins. I know just the people. Of course he does. That evening, two very small, very serious girls arrive at your door. They're Lou's nieces, 10 years old, identical braids, identical expressions of extreme judgment. They run errands, Lou explains, and also spy. One of the girls, Mimi, steps forward and hands you a folded note that simply says, "We are silent and discreet. Give snacks." You nod, impressed. Snacks will be provided. Within hours, they've mapped half the clerk building and drawn up a list of suspicious adults, which includes a scribe who talks to his inkpot and another who smells like garlic all the time. They're not all guilty, Mimi adds, just unpleasant. By moonrise, you feel more prepared than you have in days. Of course he does. That evening, two very small, very serious girls arrive at your door. They're Lou's nieces, 10 years old, identical braids, identical expressions of extreme judgment. They run errands, Lou explains, and also spy. One of the girls, Mimi, steps forward and hands you a folded note that simply says, "We are silent and discreet. Give snacks." You nod, impressed. Snacks will be provided. Within hours, they've mapped half the clerk building and drawn up a list of suspicious adults, which includes a scribe who talks to his inkpot and another who smells like garlic all the time. They're not all guilty, Mimi adds, just unpleasant. By moonrise, you feel more prepared than you have in days. Of course, that's when something weird happens. Courier arrives again. Same silent type. This one wears a plain robe, no insignia, and a bamboo hat that hides his face. He delivers a small, bound volume.
No seal.
No signature, just a stitched red thread across the top. You wait until he's gone before opening it. Inside, a dozen pages of notes, all in your handwriting, except you didn't write them. Your heart skips. The pen strokes are yours. The rhythm, the slight wobble in the left slanting radicals. It's like looking into a mirror that's slightly wrong. "This is terrifying," Bao whispers. Chow holds the volume close to his face. "Impeccable mimicry. Whoever did this studied your logs for weeks. The entries aren't damaging yet. They're drafts of minor memos, supply orders, census complaints, the kind of things no one double checks, which is what makes them perfect as rehearsal material. They're practicing. Someone out there is becoming you." Lou paces. "We're not just dealing with a criminal. We're dealing with a ghostwriter." Chow nods. "The most dangerous kind of bureaucrat." You stare at the forged volume, one phrase repeating in your mind like a broken abacus. "They're studying me." And then you realize you've been reacting this whole time, always a step behind. But if they're mimicking your style, what happens if you start feeding them something false? Not just bait, a trap. You grab your brush. Time to write something uniquely awful. Lou grins. "You mean like that poem you submitted last spring?" "Worse, you spend the next hour crafting a memo so specific, so laced with internal jargon and fake numbers, that only someone truly obsessed with your style would try to replicate it. Then you hand it off to Mimi and her sister. Make sure this lands in the wrong hands." They nod solemnly. "We have snacks. We'll be fast." You sit back, exhausted, your brain a tangled mass of ink and paranoia. You used to think paperwork was your enemy. Now, you're using it as a weapon. And somewhere out there, your double, your silent shadow, is about to make a very big mistake. The next morning breaks like a dropped teacup. Too early, too loud, and entirely unwelcome. You've barely cracked open your eyes when Bao bursts in, scrolls in hand, face flushed like a scholar who just misquoted Confucius in front of a royal examiner. "It worked," he hisses. "The bad memo, it was copied and filed under your name in the Department of Weights and Measures." You bolt upright, brain barely caught up. "They copied the fake audit memo?" "No," Chow says, entering behind him with a teacup and zero ceremony. "They copied the counterfeit barley requisition from last night, the one with the deliberately incorrect unit conversions and a made-up grain variety called Imperial Puffcorn." You blink. "They really filed that?" "Stamped and sealed," Chow confirms. The clerk who processed it even added a side note suggesting the puffcorn might be appropriate for border rations. Lou strolls in, arms behind his head. "So now we know two things. One, our forger has an insider feeding them your notes. And two, the Department of Weights and Measures will approve literally anything with enough commas." You pace the room, thinking hard. The trap worked, but it revealed something deeper than you expected. This isn't just embezzlement. It's bureaucracy turned performance art. Someone's built an entire side operation on the illusion of your precision. They're not just using your signature, they're using your style. You mutter, "Who benefits?" "Everyone." Lou shrugs. Fake grain means someone pockets the difference. Fake audits mean someone's covering their trail. And if it all traces back to you, well, you're expendable, like a cheap brush. Chow sips his tea. Historians still argue whether the Tang bureaucracy collapsed under its own weight or was simply too clever for its own survival. You feel that weight now, pressing between your shoulders like an invisible scroll. Let's make a list, you say. So you do. Known facts. Forgeries mimic your handwriting and ledger style. Red fox stamp appears on at least 5 documents. Camphor-scented ink. Unusual, possibly imported. Silent courier with bamboo hat delivered rehearsal documents. Forged puffcorn requisition got officially processed. At least one insider clerk is leaking or processing forged content. As you stare at the list, a memory stirs. Weeks ago, you'd received a brief commendation scroll from the Bureau of Canal Tolling. Odd at the time, since you'd never submitted data to them. You dig it out. Sure enough. Same fox mark, hidden beneath a seal. It wasn't a commendation, it was a plant. They were testing your reaction. You realize this has been unfolding far longer than you knew. Your stomach twists. They're building a case against me. Chow looks up sharply. If they file enough evidence, someone higher up might believe you're the one siphoning tax grain, not the other way around. And if it reaches the censorate, Liu adds, you'll be painting calligraphy in exile, with a rock, on cave walls. The thought sends a cold wash down your back. You've got to take control, and soon. Enter Lady One. She returns unannounced, as ever, with the expression of someone who just caught you eating soup straight from the ladle. She tosses a scroll on your desk. Explain this, she says. You unroll it. Does the puffcorn report? You stall. I had this tested by 3 different agricultural inspectors, she says. One of them is now writing a dissertation on it. Chow coughs. Lady Wen leans forward. Clerk, I'm not sure whether to promote you or report you to internal affairs. There is no such grain. You nod slowly. Exactly. That was the point. You explain the trap, the forgery, the false audit. Everything. Even the spy children, though you make them sound slightly less child labor. Why? To your surprise, Lady Wen doesn't interrupt. She listens, arms crossed, expression unreadable. When you're finished, she asks one question. Do you have proof? You pause. We have clues, style inconsistencies, the unusual ink, and the scroll with my signature that I didn't write. She sighs. Clues won't save you. You say, then help me. There's a long silence. Finally, she says, meet me at the Western Courier outpost tonight, after moonrise. Bring the forged scrolls, and no one else. Then she leaves, again, like a ghost with a deadline. You collapse in your chair. She's either going to help you, Liu says, or feed you to a pack of wild tax collectors. That night, after the sun bows out and the city softens into shadow, you wrap the scrolls in a plain cloth, slip on a cloak, and head for the courier outpost. The building is old, squat, and smells faintly of horses and mis-delivered poetry. Lady One is already there, seated at a low table, sipping bitter tea from a chipped cup. Her hair is looser than usual. No attendance. You place the scrolls before her. She opens them. See. As you leave the outpost, moonlight glinting off the canal, you clutch the jade-stamped slip in your sleeve like a talisman. You're still drowning in paperwork, but now you know which way to swim. By sunrise, your office looks less like a place of government and more like the staging ground for a quiet coup. Scrolls spread across every surface, teacups balancing precariously on the edges of diagrams, and Xiao muttering darkly about supply chain logistics under his breath. Liu's asleep on a bench, drooling onto a draft requisition for horse saddles. You don't wake him. You've learned by now that an unconscious Liu is better than a conscious distraction. You're cataloging every scroll that passed through your hands the month Su Liu was stationed in your office. Every memo, every supply order, every noodle break written in the margins of tax forms. You're looking for patterns, anything he might have copied or mimicked. Chow taps a scroll. This one's weird. It repeats a character 3 times, same odd spacing every time. See that little hook at the end? You do. There's a tiny flourish on the character for grain. Subtle, unnecessary, narcissistic. Forgery fingerprint, Chow says. He got cocky. That's your in. You gather all scrolls with that same hooked grain character, and suddenly a secondary paper trail emerges. Spanning 6 months, 3 provinces, and over 200 pounds of vanished millet. Liu wakes up just in time to ruin the mood. You know what this means? You expect something insightful. You are mistaken. It means I never want to eat millet again. You throw a brush at him. The next few days are a blur. You and Lady Wen set up a rotating review committee, quietly without drawing attention. Officially, you're streamlining document flow. Unofficially, you're sifting through the sediment of a corruption riverbed, looking for one shiny pebble of guilt. Each forged scroll reveals more names, not just Sulu, but two other junior clerks who transferred out within weeks of each other. Same handwriting patterns, same fox stamp, a conspiracy wrapped in bureaucracy and bound with silk ribbon. Still, there's no smoking brush. Historians still argue, Chow notes, whether Tang conspiracies collapsed from exposure or just got promoted upward until they vanished. It would be funny if you weren't one signature away from exile, and then a breakthrough. One afternoon, Mimi appears at your side, her braids slightly frayed and her face set in a look of pure satisfaction. She hands you a folded slip. You open it. Inside, a copied page of a private ledger, smudged but legible, contains Su Li's name, payment of 30 taels, a date, and beside it, in red, 4 character sets, G3 variant Millet Ledger Mimic. You blink. Character sets? Forgery kits. Chow explains, taking the slip. There's a whole underground market. You can buy brushstroke templates that match specific officials. It's a niche trade. You rub your temples. You're telling me people buy font packs of other people's handwriting? Lou grins. It's like identity theft, but artisanal. Mimi says nothing, only accepts a dried apricot in payment and disappears back into the shadows like a very small, very smug spy. You pass the slip to Lady One. Her expression hardens. This ties him to a known forgery ring operating near Yangzhou, she says. We raid that, we get evidence. We get evidence, we clear your name. She leaves with a snap of her robes and a promise to return in 3 days. In the meantime, you wait. And waiting in Tangera government is not idle. You're still expected to manage tax disputes, sign off on regional pig counts, and mediate a very loud, very sweaty debate over canal maintenance that involves one man screaming about a ghost clogging the lock system. That one might actually be real. Tang ghost stories are weirdly practical. During a lull, Bao approaches you with something curious. A note slipped under the clerk's door. No seal, just 4 words. Stop digging, little brush. It's vague, but chilling. Lou laughs when he reads it. They called you Little Brush. That's adorable. I've had death threats more poetic than this. But you don't laugh, because it means they know you're close. You double your caution. You burn notes instead of storing them. You begin using alternate phrasing in your memos, small reversals, changes in cadence, things the forger won't expect. If they copy your style again, you'll know. And sure enough, 2 days later, a new requisition arrives. Your name, your seal, your layout, but the wording, not quite right. Instead of allocate grain reserves accordingly, it says accommodate grain allocations accordingly. No big deal, right? Except you deliberately never use the word accommodate. It's your test word. You turn to Chow. They bit. He nods, and their bites sloppy. Lou raises a brow. So we set the trap? No, you say. We close it. You gather everything. The fake scrolls, the forged character sets, Mimi's ledger copy, the not-so-subtle threat. You write a full internal report, this time in your real style, and send it directly to Lady One. And you wait. She returns the next evening with a quiet thunder in her wake. We raided the Calligraphy Guild, she says, and found everything. Templates, ink logs, payment trails, Su Li's handwriting samples, even your puffcorn memo. Framed. You blink. They framed it. They thought it was brilliant, she says. They believed it came from a master satirist embedded in the system. You don't know whether to feel insulted or flattered. They're being held now, she continues. The senior forger's name is Lao Ji. He was part of a failed exam cohort. Turned bitter. Decided if he couldn't make it in government, he'd rewrite it literally. Poetic, Lou mutters. Stupid, but poetic. Lady When eyes you. You're clear, but not safe. Word of this will travel. You nod. You feel the weight lifting, yes, but also a new one settling in its place. Because now, you're not just an official. You're the guy who noticed, the guy who cared. And in this empire, that makes you dangerous. That night, alone in your office, you run your hand across the smooth grain of your desk. The paperwork remains. Endless. Unforgiving. But now, it feels like armor instead of chains. You survived forgery, blackmail, and puffcorn. Tomorrow, you return to taxes. But tonight, you let your eyes close, surrounded by scrolls and silence. For once, your handwriting is the only one in the room. The next morning greets you with that distinct blend of bureaucratic hangover and semi-hero status. No trumpets, of course. This is the Tang Dynasty, not a street parade. But there's a subtle shift in the way clerks bow, how messengers address you with that half-second longer pause before speaking, as if trying to remember if you're someone they should be afraid of now. You're not exactly feared, not yet, but you've crossed a line. You're now the official who noticed. That makes you either very wise or very inconvenient. You step into the records office and find your desk cleaned. Not just straightened, cleaned. Someone scrubbed off the ink rings, sorted the brushes by size, and replaced your chipped teacup with a brand new porcelain one. It's got a carp on it. Very stylish. Who did this? You mutter. Bao peeks in. Nobody knows. It just happened. Aha. In Tang bureaucracy, nobody is always someone with too much free time and a flair for symbolic gestures. But you'll take it. The scrolls from the forgery ring are sealed and labeled now, part of the official record. Lady Wen has personally escorted Lao Ji and his cohort to Luoyang for sentencing. The verdict will likely involve exile, hard labor, and perhaps the deep humiliation of copying chicken inventories for the rest of their lives. You feel relief briefly. Then come the ripple effects. First, an uptick in scroll traffic. Clerks from other departments begin forwarding everything remotely related to grain, taxes, or document formatting. In case you'd like to review it, they say with the slightly desperate tone of people who do not want to be implicated in the next scandal. Second, new regulations. Apparently, the discovery of a forgery ring inspired the Ministry of Documentation to roll out something called the Triple Signature Initiative. Every scroll now requires your name, your assistant's name, and a random third-party signature for approval. Xiao reads the edict aloud. To prevent future forgeries and ensure interdepartmental transparency, no fewer than 3 officials must approve documents over 200 characters. You groan. Historians still argue whether Tang regulation prevented fraud or simply invented more creative ways to commit it. Lu shrugs. 3 signatures. That's like putting 3 locks on a gate that's already open. You're about to argue when a courier arrives with a strange new scroll, sealed with gold thread. Fancy. Dangerous. You break the seal. It's an invitation. You've been summoned to speak at the Imperial Civil Records Symposium. Audience: senior officials, scholars, the occasional eunuch with too many questions. Location: Chang'an. Date: 10 days from now. Topic: detecting internal deception through paperwork patterns. You laugh out loud, loud enough to startle the clerk in the hallway. They want me to lecture on forgery detection? You say. Yes, Xiao says, snatching the scroll. And they spelled your name wrong. Twice. Lu adds. The irony almost knocks you over. Still, you don't have much time to laugh. Preparations begin immediately. Lady Wen isn't back yet, but her deputy arrives with travel documents and a very aggressive checklist.
Prupea tira.
Summary scroll, backup scroll, citation scroll, non-citation citation scroll. She rattles off, handing you bundles of silk-bound notes. Do I get a moment to breathe? You ask. No, she replies. This is the Tang Dynasty. You get 1 evening off barely. That night, Mimi finds you outside your residence, chewing on a dried plum and staring at the moon like it owes you rent. She sits beside you without a word, handing you a sketch she made. It's the fox symbol, drawn carefully with real ink this time.
No esmudges.
Below it, she's written, "Bad men always sign their art." You smile. You're not wrong. Are there more bad men? She asks. You sigh. Always. You smile. You're not wrong. Are there more bad men? She asks. You sigh. Always. She considers that, then asks, will you catch them too? You hesitate, then say, maybe, if they're dumb enough. Satisfied, she pockets the plum pit and vanishes into the night like some kind of tiny, bureaucratic ninja. The symposium in Chang'an looms like an appointment with a dragon. You don't exactly want to go, but how many mid-level clerks get summoned to speak in front of the empire's highest paper pushers? And so you pack brushes, fresh robes, annotated examples of puffcorn memos. You're ready. Or so you think. The journey to Chang'an is long, dusty, and blessedly uneventful. You ride partway with a merchant caravan, where one camel develops a taste for your sandal straps. You take that as a good omen. It's either that or scream. You arrive a day early and are ushered into government lodgings. The bed is soft. The paper is whiter. The ink is scented. You immediately distrust all of it. On the morning of the symposium, you're dressed in your formal robes, the kind that make you look like a scholar but feel like a rolled dumpling. Your hair's tied back too tight. Your palms are sweating. You're not used to this kind of attention. You prefer your scrolls quiet and your critics far away. But now, the eyes of the bureaucracy are on you. You step up to the lectern. The hall is quiet, too quiet. You take a breath, then another. Then you begin. You speak of loops in handwriting, of spacing errors, of fraudulent flourishes like the hooked grain character. You explain how puffcorn saved your career. You mention Mimi's fox symbol without naming her, of course. And you pause at just the right moments for polite laughter or scandalized gasps. By the end, you're not sweating anymore. You're soaring. You finish with this: the greatest forgeries are not lies. They are perfect reflections of truth. That's why they work. So if you want to detect deception, you don't just look for errors. You look for echoes, silence, then applause. You don't faint, barely. Backstage, a gray-robed minister hands you a scroll of commendation. You thank him, bow, and accidentally walk into a potted plant. Back in your lodging, you collapse face-first onto the bed. Lou sends a message from the Capitol. You're famous. They're naming a filing technique after you. Something about spacing ratios. Also, someone stole your inkwell. Of course they did. And yet, you feel good. Maybe not safe. Maybe not entirely ready. But respected. And maybe, just maybe, capable of surviving this paper-thin world a little longer. You return to the Capitol with less fanfare than you left. No drums. No parades. Not even a single flower petal fluttering from a balcony. The Tang Dynasty has a way of chewing through scandal and spitting it back out, neatly catalogued, then moving on to the next crisis. But your office? Your office feels different. There's a new layer of reverence, or at least wariness, in the way people step around your doorway, like your desk might bite. A few younger clerks bow so low you worry they're going to dislocate something. Lou greets you with a smile and a stack of documents so tall it wobbles. Welcome back, Emperor of Paper. Your kingdom awaits. You groan. How many scrolls? He tilts his head. Let's just say, if they were dumplings, we could feed the entire Silk Road. Back to reality. The forgery scandal has prompted reforms. Big ones. You've now got a new assistant, officially appointed, a bright-eyed 20-year-old named Ping who thinks color coding is a divine art. Her annotations are aggressive. Your personal notes now come back with marginalia that include motivational slogans and one suspiciously perfect lotus doodle. Still, you can't deny she's efficient. The scrolls fly faster, reviews run smoother, and with the new triple signature system in place, fake documents are practically extinct, at least for now. But the calm doesn't last. One rainy afternoon, while sipping lukewarm tea and trying to decode a tax report about silk exports from Chengdu. Why so many silkworms? Xiao bursts into your office looking rattled. He drops a scroll on your desk. Read this. You scan it. A routine requisition form on the surface. But halfway down, you see it. The spacing, the rhythm, that telltale echo. Your stomach twists. It's a new forgery. Not by Sulu. This one's cleaner, slicker. It doesn't mimic your writing. It mimics Wen's. Your voice drops. She's not even back yet. Xiao nods grimly. Someone's getting bolder. You take the scroll apart line by line, spotting two more echoes. Phrases lady when uses in official briefings, and her unique habit of adding a vertical stroke to the end of certain sentence breaks. This forger isn't just copying, he or she is studying. And that's when you realize the forgery ring didn't end with Lao Ji. It evolved. Later that week, you find Lu standing over the courtyard pond, skipping rocks and muttering to himself. You join him, passing over the newest scroll in silence. He whistles. So someone's playing the long game. You nod. They're not forging me anymore. They're climbing the ladder. Historians still argue, he says, skipping another rock, whether bureaucracy fosters order or just breeds smarter criminals. This time you don't laugh. That evening you call a quiet meeting in your chambers. No candles. Just the ambient glow of dusk and the soft scraping of brush against parchment. Ping, Xiao, Lu, and Bao are there. You lay out your theory. This isn't just a lone forger. It's a network. Someone new has taken the reins, and they're reaching higher. Ping frowns. How high? You point to the forgery. This one almost authorized a grain reroute. If it passed, 100 carts would have vanished into storage. somewhere near the estates of Minister Zhou. Everyone goes silent. Minister Zhou isn't just powerful. He's politically radioactive, untouchable in theory. His family traces its roots back to the founding of the dynasty. You don't accuse someone like Zhou without a guarantee. Without proof, you're not brave, you're reckless. But you're starting to see a pattern. A second forgery appears days later. This time, it mimics the style of the regional overseer of linen. Another shipment, another adjusted route. When you map it out, the reroutes form a clear trail, all roads leading toward the same outer district. It's the supply network equivalent of a finger pointing straight at someone's estate. Still not enough to make a formal case. But now you're angry. You launch a covert review. Not officially, just accidental cross-checking. As Liu puts it, you begin double-verifying scrolls tied to Minister Zhou's jurisdiction. It's slow, meticulous, and it stinks of danger. During one late-night session, Ping whispers, "What happens if he finds out?" You don't answer, because if Zhou realizes you're sniffing around, you won't just lose your post. You'll vanish into the bureaucratic void. 1 minute, you're coordinating livestock census data. The next, you're reassigned to count river pebbles near Tibet. Still, you dig. Mimi returns with whispers. A paper artisan in Chang'an remembers printing unusual watermark scrolls, commissioned by a noble's aide Zhou's cousin. Allegedly. She sketches a sample for you. The watermark matches one of the fake reroute scrolls exactly. That's your first real thread. Then Xiao uncovers a shipment discrepancy that links Zhou's estate to a warehouse. On record, completely empty. In reality, overflowing with grain, wine, and textiles supposedly lost in transport months ago. The evidence piles, slowly, carefully, and so does the risk. A letter arrives from an anonymous source. No name.
No seal.
Just, not everyone who writes scrolls survives the replies. Liu snorts when he reads it. So dramatic. What's next? Riddles in blood ink. You try to smile. You really do, but your pulse hasn't stopped pounding for 3 days. You keep your mouth shut. You keep your scrolls locked. You send fake reports to smoke out spies. And finally, after 2 weeks of sleepless nights, you have enough. Enough to prove that Minister Zhou's cousin arranged forged scrolls authorizing reroutes. Enough to show those reroutes led directly to missing shipments. Enough to connect the forgery ring's second phase to a noble's household. But not quite enough to publicly name Zhou. So you do the only thing you can do. Lady Wen returns 2 days later, right as you're beginning to draft your resignation letter. Not that you'd actually resign, this is the Tang Dynasty, and quitting bureaucracy is like trying to walk out of a spiderweb while wearing a robe made of honey. She arrives at dawn, her presence cutting through the compound like the sharp snap of a new seal.
No greetings.
No formal parade, just her steady steps and that infamous calculating gaze. You barely have time to bow before she speaks. I read your scroll. No other preamble. You nod. And she tilts her head. It's bold, it's dangerous, and I think it's absolutely correct. Relief doesn't wash over you so much as it trips, stumbles, and spills tea on your lap. She steps into your office, eyes lingering on the pinned maps and overlapping scrolls, the feverish scrawl of ink outlining your forgery connections. She studies it all in silence. Then, with a flick of her wrist, she picks up your dossier and adds her signature. You blink. That's it. Not quite. She opens a new scroll from her sleeve, one bearing the imperial cipher. It's a summons. Not for you this time, for Minister Zhou. Wen's voice is quiet, but firm. We're moving forward. You swallow. Will it be public? She raises an eyebrow. That depends. If Zhou cooperates, it'll be a quiet removal. An early retirement with no questions asked. If he resists, you can fill in the rest. You've seen enough scrolls to know how these things end. A week of silence follows. A week of soft footsteps and cautious glances. Zhou doesn't respond, but his cousin vanishes. One moment he's seen entering a bathhouse, the next, poof. The local rumor mill goes into overdrive. Eaten by ghosts. Fled to Scylla dressed as a monk. Turned into a goose and flew south. The truth, as always, remains less poetic. Then, one morning, you arrive at your desk and find a sealed scroll bearing the imperial dragon. Inside, an official announcement. Minister Zhou has been relieved of duty for reasons of health and administrative fatigue. His assets are frozen, and his estate placed under review. No trial, no execution.
No fanfare.
The Tang way, justice in the quietest font possible. You lean back in your chair, exhaling hard enough to fog the window. It's over, at least this chapter. Lady Wen calls for you that afternoon. Her chambers are brighter than usual, sunlight streaming through paper-paneled windows, casting geometric shapes across the floor. She's sitting cross-legged with a brush in hand, mid-stroke. I've decided to promote you. You blink. Promote. To oversee interregional documentation compliance. You squint. Is that a real department? It is now, she says, without looking up. Someone needs to make sure this kind of forgery doesn't happen again. I want layered review protocols, cross-verification loops, and a ban on calligraphy that's too pretty. Suspicious. Your mind races. This would mean I leave this post? She finally looks up. You'd have your own office, staff, a wider reach, more headaches. You don't answer right away, because for all the chaos, for all the stress and late nights and vanishing ink pots, you've grown attached to the scroll-choked corner of the empire. Still, the idea of real change, of building something that outlasts you, it stirs something deep. You give a slow nod. I'll do it. Lady Wen's lips curve into the barest smile. I thought you might. The next few weeks blur. You move to a new chamber, larger, better lit. Ping comes with you, of course, dragging a cart of categorized brushes and an actual potted bamboo tree for energy flow. Lu remains in your old office, but sends cryptic messages like, your successor just spilled tea on the census scroll. Chow now runs an audit division. Bao claims he's going into poetry, but mostly just naps under a peach tree and complains about ink prices. You build new systems. Buy comfort there, even if half of them tried to kill you metaphorically. Mimi visits occasionally, always with a new drawing. One week it's a fox in official robes. The next, a very flattering portrait of you fighting a giant scroll monster with a calligraphy brush. You hang that one above your new desk, and slowly you realize something. You're not just surviving this bureaucracy anymore. You're shaping it, which, given everything you've been through, might be the biggest miracle of all. The days stretch on with a new rhythm, less frantic but no less full. Your title, Director of Interregional Documentation Compliance, still earns some chuckles in the courtyard, but those who laugh usually stop when they see your seal. Or the backup copy. Or the backup of the backup copy. You now sit at the intersection of every scroll crossing more than one province. Everything from silk quotas to road repair permits flows through your office. It's a river of ink, and you're the bridge, the dam, and the slightly over-caffeinated toll collector. Ping thrives in the new setup. She invents something called scroll triage, dividing documents into urgent, routine, and this could have been a rooster's footprint for all it's worth. She also creates a chart of forgery red flags, which includes odd spacing, recycled metaphors, and overuse of the phrase heavenly blessings, because that's always suspicious. You're not sure how, but the chart becomes popular. It's copied, translated, and displayed in at least 4 different provinces. One official even adds illustrations. Another adds glitter. Bureaucracy, like fashion, has trends. Despite the structure, the work never really ends. Every time you patch one leak, another appears. One month, it's forged tax relief forms from Luoyang. Another, it's duplicated rice inspection scrolls from Fujian, complete with fake mud smudges. Fake mud, you think one night, blinking in disbelief. Historians still argue whether Tang officials were geniuses or just dangerously creative. Still, you're better at this now. Your eye catches forgeries faster. Your instincts sharpen. You see inconsistencies in brushstroke width, the minor imperfections of a left-handed writer mimicking a right-hander. It's like being a detective, if all your suspects wore silk and tried to kill you with paperwork. But something starts to nag at you. Patterns. There's a rhythm to the fraud that you didn't notice before. A beat hidden beneath the calligraphy. You begin to see waves. Surges of forgery following particular court edicts. Every time a new policy rolls out from Chang'an, be it trade regulation, tax adjustment, or a shipment reroute, there's a matching bump in falsified scrolls. You mention this to Lady Wen over tea. She pauses mid-sip, eyes narrowing. So it's not random, she says. It's reactive. You nod. Whoever's behind these waves is adapting faster than we are. They don't just copy, they anticipate. That changes everything. You convene a council, quiet one behind closed doors. Not the Emperor's inner circle, just your own. Lu joins, now something of a wandering consultant.
Kia brings charts.
Ping shows up with 3 new stamps she's invented, including one labeled suspicious.
Bao brings snack.
You pin scrolls to the wall. You track dates, signatures, brushwork, inks. You build what Ping calls a forgery weather map, complete with color-coded arrows. A pattern emerges. The forgeries surge not just after major edicts, but also before them. Someone is getting early access to policy drafts. Someone close to the top. You feel your stomach drop. Again, there's a list of possible leaks. Court scribes, junior ministers, that quiet guy who always sneezes near the tea trays. But the truth is, it could be anyone with even a whiff of power. And for the first time, your own success works against you. You've cleaned up the forgery scene so well, so visibly, that the smarter criminals are adapting faster. They're hiring better copyists, studying new handwriting quirks. One scroll even mimics your own personal formatting style, complete with your favorite margin spacing and the faint scent of chrysanthemum oil. You're being imitated, not flattered. Targeted late one night, staring at the ceiling in your new quarters, you realize it's become a game of chess, not brute force, strategy. They know your rules. They're learning your habits. They're baiting you to chase shadows while they move shipments, shift gold, manipulate influence. It's almost elegant, and that makes it worse. So you try something radical. You go analog. You stop sending formal directives and instead dispatch verbal messengers. You have Ping draft decoy scrolls, full of deliberate errors, incorrect numbers, fake dates, inconsistent brushstrokes, and you wait to see which ones get copied. Sure enough, one of the fakes resurfaces 2 weeks later. It's altered, yes, but the bones of it, the phrases, the signature mimicry are yours. You've set the bait, and someone took it. You close your eyes and smile. Now we follow the ink. And you do. The false scroll is traced to a tiny records office in a province most maps get wrong. You send Bao, partly because no one notices Bao, and partly because he looks like he belongs wherever he naps. He returns 2 weeks later with a sloppily disguised draft and a name. A mid-tier courier with ties to at least 3 noble households. A courier who handles preview copies of court edicts. He disappears naturally, gone like smoke. But now you have a leak vector. The courier was part of a broader system. A group of quiet bureaucrats who sell early edict previews to forgers and smugglers. In return, silk, protection, promotion. It's not forgery anymore. It's espionage. Lady Wen reads your report with a grim face. So we're not chasing ghosts, she says. We're hunting a network. You nod, and they're hunting us back. She doesn't speak for a while. Then, let's make them think they've won. You raise an eyebrow. How? We give them something real, something big, something tempting. You stare at her. You know exactly what she means. A new imperial policy is about to be drafted. One involving the redistribution of land taxes. Huge, sweeping, nation-shaking. If your mysterious network gets it early, they'll move funds, forge scrolls, and exploit the chaos. Unless the scroll they intercept isn't real. Unless you forge the forgery first. Now it's a race. You sit with Lady Wen late into the night, crafting the perfect fake edict. Every word chosen carefully. Every detail embedded with traceable clues. Phrases that only appear in one dialect. Specific pen pressure patterns. Even subtle smudges planted by Ping using steamed ginger juice. You sign it. Wen seals it. Xiao distributes it to exactly the wrong people. And you wait, not for approval, but for betrayal. Takes exactly 4 days. The forged edict you crafted, so carefully planted in the hands of a lost courier, is spotted 3 provinces away. Not just spotted, implemented. A local magistrate, likely bribed or blackmailed, begins reallocating land under the terms of the fake policy. Fields are surveyed, scrolls rewritten, officials reshuffled. They took the bait. You stand over the map back in your office, watching red pins multiply like chickenpox. They moved fast. Xiao mutters, chewing on the end of a calligraphy brush. Too fast. Which means, Ping chimes in, they've done this before. The implication sinks in. They're organized, efficient, paranoid enough to avoid imperial correspondence, but greedy enough to fall for something that seemed too good to be true. You exhale slowly. This is it, the first real lead. Lady Wen arrives the next morning with a team of investigators dressed like monks. Or perhaps real monks who moonlight as investigators. With her, subtlety and power always travel hand in hand. They activated their network, she says, laying down intercepted messages, decrypted codes, and, somehow, a poem written in lemon juice. And now we can follow the burn trail. It leads you to a backwater document hub north of Luoyang, a warehouse no larger than a tea house, stacked floor to ceiling with blank scrolls, drying racks, and inkstones. But it's what's beneath the warehouse that matters. A hidden room, lined with ledger copies, handwriting samples, counterfeit seals, hundreds of them. Tools for forgers by forgers. This isn't just a workshop, it's an academy. Ping stares at one of the scrolls pinned to the wall. Is that my handwriting? It is. They copied her too. The realization lands like a stone in your chest. They've been cataloging you, tracking your revisions, studying your preferences. They've read your marginal notes, analyzed how you loop the tale of the character for truth. You're not just chasing them, you're being watched. Lady Wen moves silently through the room, hands clasped. Her face is blank, but you know her well enough to see the storm brewing just behind her eyes. These people, they've been embedded longer than we thought. Historians still argue, you mutter aloud, whether the Tang bureaucracy was a well-oiled machine or a rotting tree dressed in silk. She cracks the faintest smile. You collect evidence, every scrap, seal, and codebook. The Forgery Academy is dismantled scroll by scroll. Some of it is so sophisticated it frightens you. The seals alone, made from shaved bamboo, bound in resin, and pressed with teeth marks to simulate wear, are museum-worthy. You burn none of it. Instead, you repurpose. You launch a new training program dubbed, perhaps too enthusiastically, Forgery Awareness and Scroll Security. Ping insists on calling it FAS. The first lesson? Spotting brush pressure variations under candlelight. The second? What not to eat near important scrolls. Looking at you, dried plums. Officials grumble at first, but after 2 false scrolls are caught before they reach implementation, attitudes shift. Some even request extra sessions. You have to add a waiting list. Bureaucracy, it seems, has finally found its version of martial arts training. Meanwhile, back in Chang'an, something shifts. You receive an invitation to the inner palace. Not for questioning, not for punishment, for an audience. The emperor himself. You think it's a prank, or a trap, or both. But no, when you arrive, escorted past rows of peach trees and guards in armor that look ceremonial but definitely isn't, you find yourself in a quiet chamber with lattice windows and a sleeping crane painted across the floor. The emperor, in simple robes, looks up from a scroll. You made noise, he says, but it was useful noise. You bow so hard your spine cracks. He gestures for you to rise. I know about Zhou, about the Forgery Academy, about your team, and I know you forged an edict to trap traitors. Your mouth dries instantly. He leans in. That was bold. You nod once, because really, what else are you going to do? He stands slowly, walking toward a scroll rack, pulls out a fresh roll, hands it to you. You open it with trembling fingers. It's a new directive, official imperial recognition of your office, your team, and your systems, with authority to audit any regional bureau. You are now the highest-ranking documentation official in the empire not wearing a dragon robe. The emperor says nothing more, just turns and resumes reading. Dismissed. Later, outside, Ping catches you staring at the scroll like it might explode. You're a legend now, she whispers. Well, a scroll legend, the sexiest kind. You laugh, a little too hard, a little too relieved. Back at your office, things settle into what could almost be called peace. There are still forgeries, of course. Ambition is a renewable resource, but they're smaller, messier, more desperate. The great network you baited never fully resurfaces. But you know it's still out there, waiting, watching, planning. So you plan too. You expand your department. Recruit strange geniuses from calligraphy schools. Hire a man who smells colors and says he can hear forged ink. He's usually right. Add 3 new verification seals, one of which plays music when tapped. The empire keeps moving. Edicts roll in. Policies shift. New generations of officials join your training program. Some are eager. Some are terrified. Some are both, which is probably the right state of mind. And through it all, you remain the same tired, ink-stained scholar who once tried to correct a census scroll and got caught in a whirlwind of ghosts, politics, and forged ducks. Well, almost the same. Your robes are a little nicer now. Your staff bows a little lower. And sometimes, just sometimes, Lady Wen actually knocks before she enters. You never quite relax, but you smile more often, because against all odds, you took the most boring, mind-numbing, paper-heavy corner of the Tang Dynasty and turned it into a battlefield. And you won, at least for now. Of course, just when you start to think things might settle down, when your desk finally has more tea stains than emergency scrolls, there's a knock. It's not Lady One. It's not Ping either. It's someone you've never seen. Young, nervous, with a messenger's sash and ink-stained sleeves. He hands you a small sealed scroll.
No fanfare. No imperial seal.
Just a circle of red wax, stamped with a plum blossom. You recognize it immediately. A Plum Society seal. The Plum Society you remember from whispered tea-house conversations is less a formal organization and more a suggestion. An informal cabal of rogue calligraphers, codebreakers, seal forgers, and scroll saboteurs. Depending on who you ask, they're either the Empire's shame or its salvation, or both. The scroll reads, "You've been studying our brushstrokes. Now it's time we study yours. Congratulations on the promotion." Below that, a perfectly forged version of your signature. Down to the swoop of your truth character. You sit in silence for a full minute. Then, without looking up, you say, "Ping." She's already in the room holding tea. Read it, scanned it, already checked the ink walnut-based song-style blend, a little early for our era, which is disturbing. You sigh, so they're back. Or maybe they never left. Historians still argue, you murmur. Whether these societies were real secret guilds or just overly dramatic pen pals. Ping nods sagely. I vote dramatic pen pals. The message is clear, though your work has drawn attention beyond the imperial court. Beyond even Zhou's forgotten network. The forgers are watching again, testing you, maybe recruiting, or maybe just poking the bear to see if it still has teeth. You don't know which possibility is worse, but you do know you can't sit idle. So you start writing letters to every provincial documentation office. Not orders, suggestions, tips. You use humor. You use riddles. You include diagrams of forged ducks and stories about the time Lu fell asleep on the Emperor's seal. You add footnotes in rhyme, and they spread. Officials start copying them, annotating, creating counter-scrolls. Somewhere in Sichuan, someone paints an entire mural of your 10 scroll commandments, including the very important rule, "Thou shalt not eat plums over parchment." You've become a myth. Again, it's uncomfortable. One night, walking home, you hear two junior clerks whispering about the ghost of the ink tower, a mysterious figure who can detect forgeries by scent alone, who once sniffed out an entire land scam with nothing but a loose thread and a tea stain. You pause behind a tree. They're talking about you, kind of. Ping later tries to commission a song about you. You beg her not to. Instead, you do what you've always done. You get to work. Because while the Plum Society might be playing some inscrutable long game, and while the Empire continues to rest its entire fate on scrolls thinner than dumpling wrappers, you still have a job to do. The next crisis arrives in a stack of fish permits. They seem harmless enough. Permissions for inland fish farmers to trade across provincial lines. But something's off. The permits are too clean, too similar. The brushwork is flawless, but identically flawless. No human hand does that. Ping runs tests. Chow sets up a scroll timeline. Lu chews on dried squid until the smell alone makes you doubt your life choices. Then it hits you. The permits were printed, not copied. Printed. You don't scream, but you do gently shove the entire stack off your desk and lie face down on the floor. Printing presses in the Tang Dynasty aren't new. Woodblock printing has been around for decades, but using it to mass-produce official permits? That's a game changer. It means someone out there has found a way to mass forge bureaucracy. You call an emergency meeting. Mass forgeries. You say, we're talking hundreds, maybe thousands, of identical permits. Perfect ink. Perfect stamps. Pre-applied mud smudges. Lady When frowns. So they've industrialized fraud. You nod grimly. They've bureaucratized rebellion. The group stares at you. Ping breaks the silence. Okay, that's actually kind of poetic. You draft a new policy immediately. All official permits must now include a verification mark, an ink-on-wax impression made after issuance, with a date and official's breath signature. It's fiddly, unpleasant, requires everyone to lean in close to hot wax. But it's almost impossible to replicate en masse. Almost. A week later, 3 fake breath signatures show up in Fujian. You stare at the scrolls and laugh, because now it's a game of inches. You're no longer hunting big frauds. You're adjusting the needle, matching tempo, creating puzzles too weird to solve quickly. Scrolls with random color swatches, inverted sentence structures, a hidden phrase in an obscure Tang dialect that translates to "nice try, moron." It's absurd, and it works. Slowly, the forged fish permits stop, and you start getting letters, not complaints, thanks, from farmers, from junior clerks, even from a fish merchant who admits, begrudgingly, that he tried to bribe a courier but was foiled by your breath wax policy. "Now I actually pay my taxes," he writes, "which is annoying, but my boat hasn't sunk, so thanks." You hang it on the wall, because you know the war isn't over. But maybe, just maybe, you've made the battlefield a little stranger, a little harder to exploit, and a lot more interesting. Your office smells like melted wax, damp parchment, and pickled lotus root. You didn't ask for the root, Lou brought it in as a brain snack. You suspect it's his way of compensating for the time he fell asleep on a shipment of arrest warrants and sent them to the wrong province. 2 weeks later, the goats were returned. Long story, but today your thoughts are elsewhere, because you're reviewing a scroll that has no right to exist. A property tax document from a region that hasn't had a functioning office in 6 months. The magistrate retired, no replacement has been assigned, and yet, here it is, perfect scroll, flawless formatting, crisp ink, all signatures present, too perfect. You run your fingers across the rice paper, smooth, fresh.
No creases.
No sweat marks, no evidence of being read more than once. This scroll was created for one purpose only, to exist. You take a candle, let the wax drip just so. The ink shimmers faintly, not real ink, not walnut or charcoal, mineral-based dye.
À Forgerie Signature.
Ting leans over your shoulder. "We've got another plum." You nod, jaw tight. It's the third one this month. These forgeries aren't just about profit anymore. They're about presence. Someone is testing your systems, poking the bureaucratic skeleton to see where it creaks. You suspect it's the Plum Society again, but this isn't like before. It's more artistic, like they're leaving behind scrolls the way a painter leaves canvases. The next morning, you receive a delivery wrapped in silk. It's a scroll, just one. On it is a poem. A scroll too smooth to trust. A seal too round to hold. A name written without weight, yet worth its weight in gold. No signature, just a brush-drawn plum blossom in the bottom corner. You call in everyone, Wen, Ping, Chow, Lu, even a very confused fish merchant. "This isn't forgery," you say. "This is performance." Chow adjusts his glasses. Historians still argue whether the Plum Society was a criminal syndicate or a philosophical rebellion disguised as paperwork. Ping raises a brow. "Why not both?" Lady Wen finally speaks. "What if it's not about power anymore? What if they're doing this just to prove they can?" That lands hard, because that means your entire job, your carefully built bureaucracy, is being used as a canvas. You set to work, not to stop them, but to answer. Your reply is not an arrest warrant or a new policy, or even a public condemnation. It's a scroll. On it, a poem of your own. A brush can cut as clean as steel. A scroll can hide or make things real, forge with care or forge with flair. But know the eyes that watch are there. You stamp it not with a seal, but with your thumbprint, inked in blue, and you send it out. No destination, just out, to drift along the empire's veins like pollen. 3 weeks later, you find a reply tucked into your archive shelves. It's short, just 5 characters. Your move, Scrollsmith. That night, you don't sleep. Instead, you unroll every scroll you've ever marked. Not to recheck them, but to remember what made them yours. Your brush curve, your margin spacing, your quirks. You realize something profound. The war over paperwork isn't about fraud anymore. It's a dialogue. You and them and you. 2 schools of scrollcraft writing to and through each other, like rival poets with a shared addiction to ink. And you can't help but smile, because you were never meant for battlefields. You were meant for margins. There's still plenty of work, border trade regulations, census reviews, a particularly bizarre request from a western province asking if goats can be counted as dependent family members for tax purposes. Ping votes yes, Chow votes no. You compromise with only if they have names. But beneath it all, the game continues. Each new forged scroll you catch is more elegant than the last. Sometimes they even correct typos in your policies, just to mess with you. One forger actually added footnotes. You couldn't be mad. The formatting was immaculate. Eventually, a young scribe brings you something strange. A scroll signed by you, but written in a hand that's not yours. It's a request for imperial funding, to build a school, a place to teach documentation integrity, calligraphy ethics, and the history of Tang-era forgery. You stare at it for a long time, then you bring it to the emperor. He reads it, smirks. So you forged a funding scroll to fund anti-forgery training? You don't answer, because you didn't write it. Someone else did. Someone better. He nods. Approved. And just like that, the school is real. The irony is delicious. You call it the Ink House. It's hidden within a quiet compound near Chang'an.
No guards.
Just scrolls. Dozens of eager students. Most will end up in dry, normal jobs. But one or two, well, you keep an eye on them. Especially the ones who add flourishes where none are needed. It's quiet work. But it matters, because every dynasty thinks it'll last forever. But the only thing that really survives is records. And now you're the keeper of them. Maybe even the storyteller, too. One of your students, small, serious, fond of painting turtles in the margins, approaches one day and asks, "Master, how will we know if someone forged history itself?" You smile. That's what we're here to figure out. And so, even as the empire hums on, as tax scrolls pile and policies shift and the occasional duck permits sneaks past your desk, you keep writing, teaching, watching, not just for lies but for style. 'Cause this isn't just a job anymore, it's a craft. And crafts are meant to be shared. The wind outside is gentle tonight. You can hear it slide between the bamboo slats, soft and hushing, like a breath taken just before a secret. You're alone in your office, the candlelight flickering across hundreds of tightly bound scrolls. Everything smells of ink, wax, and faintly toasted rice. Ping was snacking again and probably left crumbs in your reference copies of the land registry guidelines. But you're not reading tonight. You're writing, not a decree, not a policy, not even a warning to the next crooked merchant who thinks official seal can be bought at a tea house stall. Tonight, you're writing a letter to no one in particular, or maybe to everyone. It's a summary of all you've learned, about bureaucracy, about forgery, about the absurdities of trying to control a nation with quills and thread-bound parchment, about what it feels like to drown in scrolls only to find your footing not by standing tall, but by learning to float. There's something humbling in that. You write slowly, brushing each character with care. You recall the day you first stepped into this office, sleeves too stiff, heart pounding, totally unaware that your biggest adversary wouldn't be bandits or rebels, but flower smugglers with a knack for poetic license and creative geography. You think of Zhou, the original chief documentarian, who may or may not have faked his own death to live as a scroll monk. Historians still argue whether Zhou's disappearance was a bureaucratic glitch or a planned vanishing act. Either way, he left behind a legacy written in faint brushstrokes and water-damaged annexes. You also think of the time Liu accidentally ordered 3,000 roosters instead of 300 because he mistook the character for tenfold as urgent. The roosters were very urgent and very loud. These memories are ridiculous and precious. You smile and keep writing. Later, Ping walks in, arms crossed. She watches you in silence, then drops a scroll on your desk. "New policy draft," she says. "Also, we're out of tea." Again, you nod, tuck the scroll aside, and gesture for her to sit. She doesn't. Of course not. "You're going to retire, aren't you?" she asks, not looking at you. You look down at your letter. There's still so much to do. So many tricks out there. So many minds like yours, restless, curious, maybe a little reckless, finding ways to game the system. Not because they hate order, but because they can't resist a puzzle. And you understand them. You are them. You once spent 4 hours figuring out how to encode a bribe rejection into a flower pattern. It was beautiful. Nobody noticed. You shake your head.
No.
"Not retiring," you say, "just reorganizing." Ting raises an eyebrow. "That sounds suspicious." You lean back and grin. "Exactly." In the weeks that follow, you quietly appoint Xiao as deputy. You let Lu think he's secretly in charge of a covert inspection team. You encourage Lady when to begin publishing scroll integrity essays under a pen name. She chooses Silent Brush, which is a little dramatic, but hey, she is a poet at heart. And you? You slip into the margins. You leave gentle traps in documentation templates, blank spaces that should never be blank, dates that test whether someone understands lunar formatting, haikus hidden in regulation footnotes. You start receiving replies, always subtle, always clever, correction here, a brushstroke critique there. One scroll even has a tiny drawing of a squirrel in the upper right corner, gnawing on what might be a forged seal. You send a reply, a squirrel with a monocle. Ping finds it hilarious. You never confirm your identity, but your style is unmistakable. Eventually, a young courier brings you one final scroll. She's nervous, eyes wide, clutching the silk-wrapped bundle like it contains imperial secrets. It sort of does. Inside, a list, neatly written, signed Archivist of the Plum. It names every person in your region involved in organized forgery. And underneath, a note. We're done here, for now. Thanks for the game. See you in the margins. You sit quietly, then you laugh, soft and long, because this was never a game about winning. It was about balance, about keeping the scrolls honest, not flawless, about letting the system breathe, but not break. And maybe, just maybe, about teaching the next generation how to tell the difference between a clever fix and a dangerous loophole. You roll up the scroll and place it in your private archive. No seal, just a red thread, like Zhou used to do. The room feels lighter now. Outside, the lanterns sway gently in the wind. You take one last look around. At the desks, the worn brushes, the absurdly large jar labeled emergency ink. You once used it to trap a rat. And the countless pieces of history scattered like breadcrumbs across your floor. Then you sit, and you write the last line of your letter. When in doubt, follow the ink trails. They always lead home. Word count. 1095 wind down. Final 300 words. And now, as your brush stills and the candles flicker low, you find yourself easing back into the quiet. The scrolls are all rolled. The desks are cleared. The ink has dried. Outside, the wind moves lazily through the trees, carrying with it the scent of bamboo and tea leaves and maybe a little plum blossom, too. Your breath slows, your thoughts quiet, because in this world of paper and silence, you've done what needed doing. You've chased the truth across margins and formulas, through forged seals and sly riddles. You've argued with ghosts in the ink and made peace with the chaos of record-keeping. And somehow, amid the madness, you've made something real, something lasting. Now, there's nothing left to fix, just soft paper, dim light, the faint echo of calligraphy. Let your eyes close. Let the ink trails fade gently into the dark. You're not alone. Others are still writing, still sealing, still fighting for clarity in a world of parchment fog. But for now, for tonight, it's enough. You are still. You are safe. You are home.